What's up, fight fans? Welcome to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. We are joined here today for a special episode of the MMA Plug where we're going to cover a couple of different things in the combat sports world. But first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to the Mile High Sports crew. The NFL training camp season is in full session, full swing, I should say. The boys are out there covering everything from the latest and greatest of headlines and clips, content, all of that to be had from Broncos camp out there in Dove Valley. Make sure that you're giving them a like, share, and follow with everything in the mix there. They are doing the best to be able to provide you that NFL training camp coverage. There is also a lot of things to be said or discussed right now with CU football and the news this week with Coach Prime. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. He revealed that he underwent a cancer diagnosis and an operation to treat the cancer. Coach Prime, we are all with you there, my man. In the NHL, it's the off season. Avalanche talk is going to be ramping up as off season things and activities ramp up. Nuggets off season talk in the NBA world. Obviously, Jokic is always going to be the center of attention. This week, we saw him out there having a very exuberant and emotional display with his horses winning a race. And a lot of people pointed out that he looked like he was more emotional over the horses winning the race over his actual reaction when they won an NBA championship. We all know how Jokic is. I mean, he loves his horses. That's one thing that we know about the Serbian guy there. And then we have the Rockies. Rockies are pulling up the caboose, sitting at 28 and 79. They did have a beacon shining light of hope as they signed their first round draft pick, Matt Holliday's son, one of the biggest deals ever for a high schooler to be had in Major League Baseball history. Hopefully, the Rockies don't burn the kid. Whether it's on the magazine side of things, the podcast, the website, merch drops, social media, make sure that you give these guys here at the Mile High Sports Network some love. They are doing incredible work and things out there to provide you with nothing but the latest and greatest as far as all of those things are concerned. Now, moving along to the Colorado rundown, I always like to stress this message if possible. If you can, please buy the tickets directly from the athletes on the cards. That definitely helps them as far as their commission goes, and it helps them to be able to leverage and grow their platform for future opportunities. This weekend, we have an event going down at the Stampede. It's going to be an afternoon show that's off of Havana Street right over there in Aurora. It is CJJC, Sweet Summer Grappling. Going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the program here. In a couple of weeks, on August 15th, also at the Stampede, it's going to be a Friday night show. We have Colorado Combat Club. It's going to be a show that I think that fans are going to be wildly entertained from start to finish. We have some big names that are on the card. We have vets from major organizations and a couple of pros on the rise who are knocking on the door of getting the call to the big show. Grant Neal being one of those. He is in our main event. We have a co-main event, which is a bitter rematch, a grudge match for the ages between Micah Haas and Alex Rego. They fought a couple of years ago on a Fury card out here locally, a very tightly contested bout that came down to only a couple of small scoring sequences. And these guys do not like each other. They've shared no shortage of venom being slung ever since that point. And I look forward to seeing them have the opportunity to go out there and put some hands on each other. At the, excuse me, the very next night, don't want to miss over this or skip over this one. We have BYB coming back out here to the Stockyards, another Stockyard Brawl show. You have Courtney Cameron having the opportunity to become a two-division world champion, someone who is a veteran of the Combat Club cage, also just a all around salt of the earth person in our MMA community. I always like to give Courtney a shout out and highlight her and the work that she's done because everything has been earned. That woman has put in the work to get all of the accolades and the praise that she's gotten, and all of these opportunities have been something that have been paid in full with blood, sweat, and tears. Also on that card, we have George the Buzzsaw Martinez making his bare knuckle debut. I'm hyped to see what George does. Obviously, longtime friend, former teammate, worked together with a lot of our shows. He's the DJ on a lot of my live events. I want to see Georgie go out there and do well, and I know that he's been putting in the work to prepare for this show on August 16th. On the 30th, you have a fight night card for Sparta. That is going to be a full MMA show as well as other disciplines that are going to be held within the cage. Make sure that you check them out on August 30th. Moving along from that, we're going to recap this last weekend show that went down over on Fight Island for the UFC. There was a little bit of controversy with some of the some points where RDR kind of he fudged the rules a little bit here, or might have got away with a couple of things. But I will also offer that even though it was a very close fight and Robert Whittaker had his moments, you can definitely tell that Robert Whittaker has started to slow down. And I say that with all due respect. Robert Whittaker at one point in time was by far and large the absolute undisputed best at 185 pounds. He fought the soldier of God when he was the soldier of God and walked away from it. Spent 50 minutes in the cage with that man. But even still, with what some people would perceive as time on the clock being that he's in his mid-30s, sometimes the case is when someone gets to the mountaintop at an earlier point, or they peak, if you will, earlier in their career, the descent comes a little bit sooner. I still think that at the top of the division, there are a ton of fights that Robert Whittaker fights, wins, and many guys who he still shows that he is absolutely one of the best in the world. However, I think that we also need to give credit to RDR in that, yes, he was a multi-division champion in another major organization who has came over here into the UFC and has found some success. Is he someone who I right now seeing have success against Hamzat, Dricus? I don't know that I can say that. What I can say is that he is for real. He is a legitimate contender, and he is somebody who deserves the respect of being recognized as a fighter at the top of this division. All of that to be said, I don't know what's next for him. I would like to see him have another at least 1 to 2 top 5 level fights. Top 5 and maybe get him into a title eliminator type of situation. Him sitting at 21-2 as far as his overall record, being that he has some hype behind his name as a big high profile free agent signee who is a multiple division champion from another organization. There's a lot of these buzzwords and taglines that can be used to sell RDR to the public in the process. I would still like to see him prove it, if you will, in the cage before we get him right there in the dance for a title shot. But I think that he could present some fun options for some of these guys toward the top. Maybe see him. What does he do against a Fluffy? How does he stack up against a veteran? And I know Cannonier's book, but how does he do against guys like that? Strickland is obviously suspended, but guys in that mix, how does he hold up against some of the upper echelon of the division and guys that present some different wrinkles and who are still, and I don't mean to say this to slight Bobby Knuckles, but guys who are still right now either in their prime or who are contenders on the rise and still trying to actualize their full potential. In the bantamweight division, this one where, I thought coming into the fight, there's definitely a high level of risk coming into this matchup for Petr Yan, being that Marcus McGee was so much lower in the rankings. But Petr Yan, I just firmly believe on any given night is top 3, top three for sure in the 135-pound division. That little Siberian gangster is so talented. I think that the skid that he went on after losing the title spoke a lot more to the mental aspect of the game than it did anything physically or tactically. I think that he still thinks that he deserves a title shot or that he should be the guy in the mix right now, especially he made the comments or the remarks of him beating the incumbent challenger and Corey Sandhagen. But I also think it's fair to say that Corey is a much better product than he was when they fought. Piotr Jan, I believe he's probably he's probably the guy who's next in line for the title shot. Whoever wins this matchup between Corey and Merab, I wouldn't be surprised if that's who Jan ends up facing next. I'm in for it. Again, like I say, from a skills standpoint, Piotr Jan's boxing is so fun to watch. His footwork is clean. He's a better grappler than he gets credit for, despite the result of the fight that happened with Merab. But again, that was kind of during that stretch of a fighter who wasn't really himself. Piotr Jan has been able to rally and get himself back into the winner's circle, and now he's on a bit of a run. What is next for him? I guess we'll see pending the result of that matchup between Merab and Corey. Shar Bullet Magomedov back on the card in the mix against Powerbar Marc-Andre Barrio. This was a fight that I think was, I don't want to necessarily say was a favor for Shara Bullet, but it was certainly a favorable matchup stylistically. This is a matchup where I don't believe that he had to go in there and worry about somebody who had a unique skill set that is extremely hard to prepare for, like he had in his previous fight against MVP. I don't know that there's anybody in the world out there that you can use to really adequately prepare yourself to fight Michael Venom Page. Maybe unless you had Wonder Boy in your camp, that's possibly the only person who gives you somewhat of that look. That all being said, I still think that Shara has many holes in his game, and he had his nose shattered by Powerbar in the process. He's a guy who's going to give you fun fights. He risks himself. He puts himself out there in some dangerous positions to commit for the big shot because he wants to have that highlight reel. He wants to go for the finish. That also at times leaves himself defensively compromised. But from a fan standpoint, it's entertaining, right? It's entertaining, especially when we see, oh man, the one-eyed pirate with the big old red beard who is pouring blood from his nose out there still slinging leather all the way until the final bell. Goes out there and wins fight of the night honors in the process. It's fun to watch. Is he a title contender? Not a chance. Especially when we talk about some of the other guys. We just spoke about RDR. We mentioned in that process DDP as well as Hamzat. They would absolutely ragdoll Sharbo Magomedov. And it would not even be a close fight. Not even close. Moving on from that matchup, I'm going to talk a few more of this before we continue down throughout the program. A little quicker one today. Asu Almabayev, this was a rank matchup or a matchup with ranking on the line for the flyweight division against Jose Ochoa. Both of these fighters had some moments. I think that we deserve to keep on putting the flyweights in premier positions. This was a good spot on this card, albeit a day card, but this was feature fight between a couple of guys who are on the rise in the 125-pound division. And you saw some pretty tactical grappling as well as some exciting offense between both of these guys with the striking. Almabayev was not happy with his performance. He had the boogeyman himself, Shavkat Rakhmonov, in there. He's a kid who obviously he wants to go out there and he wants to perform well. He wants to finish fights. He has a combat jiu-jitsu background. He didn't get the finish, but It was an entertaining fight in the process, so I'm looking forward to seeing what both of these guys do. That puts Jose Ochoa down to 8-2, but again, another flyweight prospect with a lot of potential and has some exciting facets to his game, whether that be on the canvas or on the feet. Bogdan Guskov, that man has some power in that right hand. The way that he knocked out Nikita Krylov, that was impressive. Krylov has been a fixture of the rankings in the 205-pound division for some years now. Guskov is that next generation, or he's the new guard at 205, and he's announced his presence with authority. That moves his record up to 18-3 now. I look to see him have a big name in his next matchup. We just had the announcement that I believe it's Olberg is going to be fighting Dominic Reyes. I wouldn't mind seeing Guskov get the winner of that fight, depending on how far it is that he wants to wait for a matchup. You had Bryce Mitchell taking on Said Nurmagomedov. This was a battle, folks. This was a fight that went down to the wire, back and forth. This ended up being a unanimous decision victory for Bryce. Bryce got hurt in the first round, but Bryce, that Arkansas tough SOB, he was able to rally through it, had some slick grappling, was able to do enough on the feet to be able to find his entries, body locks, takedowns, had some submission attempts in the process. He credited Said Nurmagomedov saying that, man, that dude is strong. He said that that was the fight that his body hurt the most ever that he could recall in his career. So I think that that is a testament to how quality Nurmagomedov is. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this fight later on in the program. Just talking about another couple here to round out the show, or to round out this segment, I should say, if you will. Want to give props to a fighter who does a lot of his training now in the Denver area, originally out of Dagestan, but it's the king of Kung Fu, Muslim Salakhov. Muslim Salakhov, he picked up a win last year here in Denver, if you recall that fight against Santiago Ponzinibbio. I mean, in his 40s, this man is still putting people cold out. The way that he knocked out Carlos Leal over the weekend, that was impressive. He earned a bonus, 50K for that. Again, it's something that you can only marvel at and be impressed by, the way that he is still starching guys in his 40s. His last couple of fights have been first round knockouts. He's on a 3-fight win streak now. Congratulations to you, King of Kung Fu. Another guy who has been around for a long time. He's a veteran of the Ultimate Fighter. Just a guy who, whenever you hear fighters speak of this man, they all speak very highly of him. And that's Davy Grant. Davy Grant got the victory over Damon Blackshear, who Blackshear in his own respect has been making a name for himself, has been super active over the course of his tenure here in the UFC. But Davy Grant, just one of those salty dog, old stalwart vets who, if you leave him around, he's going to keep on finding ways to win. You had a matchup that resulted in a pretty wild finish for Tabitha Ricci. Baby Shark gets the finish over Amanda Ribas. Amanda Ribas revealed that that elbow that landed did some damage to a previous injury that she had in her face, shifted a plate. So she's back on the shelf for a little while, getting that taken care of. Congratulations to Baby Shark. You know, we mentioned last week on the program that her striking has been developing, has been improving, especially since she's been with Callum Walsh. Well, that work or that time by osmosis has just continued to help grow her. You also had a matchup where we saw a freak injury in the process. We had Stephen Wynn go and put the work on Mama Yaya. I mean, the dude got dropped multiple times in the process, and then his eye blew up. They reported that there was no significant structural damage, that it was all just swelling. Given that it comes from the commission or the personnel over in Fight Island, I look at that with skeptical hippo eyes. Typically, when you see an injury that blows up that fast with that type of swelling, it's some sort of structural issue to the cheekbone, the orbital floor. There's a break somewhere in that process, that there's an air gap or a split in the sinus that allows for that to fill up with air. Again, to have a racquetball sitting there on your face and to say that there was no significant structural damage, I'm just skeptical in that process. And then we had some heat cool off immediately, or a hype train derailed, if you will. And maybe it's a situation of those UFC jitters, as we've spoken to with a couple of these other high profile signees like Pitbull a few weeks back, who then redeemed himself in his sophomore attempt. But we had Marcus Buchecha, who is widely regarded as one of the greatest grapplers in the world, especially at heavyweight in MMA, might be the best pure jiu-jitsu MMA athlete in all of the heavyweight division in every promotion out there. But he dropped his first fight in the UFC against Martin Budai. At heavyweight, it's not going to take much for him to be able to rally and turn around. I mean, you have guys who go on some pretty bad losing streaks in the heavyweight division, but as long as you're halfway competitive, you're going to continue to get a shot because they need bodies. And especially if he's able to turn things around and get on a little bit of a run, he's going to be right there in the mix again. But that wraps up our talk for the UFC recap from this last weekend. What did you folks think? Let me know online. Hit me up on social media. That's at comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram or Threads. We're going to move along to this weekend's UFC preview. First off, though, want to give a little bit of recognition to the PFL card. You have Logan Storley, who has taken on Thad Jean in the 170 finals. You have Jesus Pinedo taking on Mavlid Kolobayev in the 145-pound finals. That's all good and great. Not exactly a season or something that I've been following myself as closely personally, full disclosure. But what I am going to be tuning in for, watching this card for, is to see Isaiah Diggs make his debut. Isaiah Diggs is going to be making his debut against Damian Nelson. For those who don't know, Isaiah Diggs, he trains here in Colorado, gets his work in across the state, doing some cross training at a few different camps. But I will say that he has fought across multiple promotions here in Colorado. He has fought for us at Combat Club. He is also a veteran of, or an alumni, I should say, at Colorado State University Pueblo, where he wrestled while he was there. He's a good dude, man. He's a kid who works his tail off, goes out there and leaves it all in the cage each and every time. He's coming to the contest at 5-0, and he presents a skill set, especially at 145 pounds, where, man, he's a tank. You have the wrestling background along with an ever-growing striking skill set and arsenal of attacks. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what Isaiah Diggs is going to be able to do here in the PFL. Moving along from that, we have the UFC preview this weekend. There was a last-minute shakeup as far as the card goes in the main event specifically. Headlining on the A side for this weekend, though, we do have a Denver fighter. We have Tatsuro Taira. Tatsuro Taira coming into the contest at 16-1 is taking on Hyun-Sun Park. This is Japan taking on South Korea. Now, Park is coming into the contest at 10-0 to Taira's respective 16-1. I think that this being a flyweight matchup, in the main event, I think that, again, this is tremendous opportunity to showcase some of this talent, and both of these guys being international talent at that, this helps grow the footprint for the sport globally. I'm really into Taira overall. I mean, everybody that I know out here in the Denver area says that this kid is a great dude. I mean, he's super respectful. He's a great training partner, and they have really high visions of what this kid could eventually become. I also trust the opinion of a good friend of mine in Brandon Royval, who fought Tatsuro Taira, and he said, "Oh yeah, like that kid is for real." And especially in the cage, he's even that much better than what he shows in the training room. So I'm really excited that they're both young and rising prospects, and I think that this is an opportunity for them to put on for themselves, showcase their skill set, and they have a lot riding on the line in terms of Park wants to protect that record at 10-0, and then Taira wants to come back in and be able to rally, get that hand raised, and show, yes, I am really who everybody is hyping me up to be. In the co-main event, you have a lightweight matchup that I think this has fireworks written all over it. And if we're being completely honest, you can potentially pencil this one in for fight of the night before we even really get going. You have a matchup between Chris Duncan taking on Matus Rombuski. Rombuski, every single time that guy goes out there, he gets into a war. Chris Duncan, on the flip side, if you guys recall the fight that got him into the UFC on the Contender Series, he was all but finished. I mean, he was on crooked legs. He was getting rocked and teed off on. He stood back and just threw a Hail Mary off of the back foot, lands it, starches his opponent. Spirit of the warrior, that Scotsman in him, that Braveheart, whatever you want to throw the tagline in that mention. And he gets signed to the UFC, and he's had some exciting fights in the process. In the feature fight, we have another lightweight fight that these two guys might very well say, okay, you think that they're getting fight of the night? Hold our beer. You have Esteban Ribovic taking on Elvis Brenner. Ribovic obviously won fight of the year last year, was on the winning side of that affair against Daniel Zellhuber. Elvis Brenner, a guy out of that shoot the box, he's a campsman or a teammate, if you will, of Charles Du Bronx Oliveira. Those guys go out there and they scrap. Plain and simple. That's what you can expect from those Brazilians. And on the flip side, again, Esteban goes out there and he wants to bring the violence. You have two back-to-back fights in the 155-pound division where we're seeing some people exit from the top ranks of the division, and there's some ground to be had, or I don't want to necessarily call it a power vacuum, if you will, but there is stake to be taken. There is market share to be cornered, if you will. Speaking on a few other matchups here on the card, on the main card, before we get to the prelims, you have Neil Magny, longtime fixture of the Denver MMA community. He's taken on Elizeu Zaleski. Veterans who you can expect to see just some crafty tools being used in the process. A combined 60 plus fights, might be 75 plus fights between the couple of these guys. Neil Magny he's a salt of the earth dude. He puts on for everybody that comes through his camps. I can speak to so many different stories of fighters through the years, young and upcoming guys, saying just how well he treated them, favors that he's done, ways that he's looked out for them or helped them be really just on track and become professionals. That's something that in an individual sport doesn't always happen. And I think that, regardless of how people end up viewing a fighter's in-cage record or their career or any of that, at the end of the day, some of this is relationships and the community that you're able to build and foster. And no matter what, I think that Neil Magny is going to be a guy who this community absolutely loves and will remember fondly for forever because of not just the willingness to go in there against tough opponent after tough opponent after tough opponent, never saying no to these top tiered challengers and these menacing prospects who are on the rise, but also for the things that have been done behind the scenes that nobody talks about or that most people don't even know. So for all of those things, thank you, Neil. Also on the card, we have a couple of exciting matchups on the prelims. You have Rinya Nakamura taking on Nathan Fletcher, a couple of guys who are young and on the rise in the 135-pound division, and I think that we get to see their hunger be put on display. You have 9-1 versus 9-2 respectively. You have Adolfo Vieira, multi-time jiu-jitsu world champion and very highly regarded grappler, growing across the board as far as his MMA skill set, but he's taken on Tresean Gore. Tresean Gore, a guy who cut his teeth through the Ultimate Fighter, has had some ups and downs throughout his UFC tenure, has had some devastating injuries in the process that he's been able to prevail through and be able to continue to get himself back to the cage. I think that this is a matchup where if you're looking at lines and you have something that presents good value for a Vieira submission, probably a pretty good value to be able to take advantage of. A couple others to hit on real quick before we move along. You have Piera Lafayette Rodriguez taking on Ketlin Sosa. Sosa of Brazil, Piera Lafayette Rodriguez. She is a veteran of the LFA. Someone who every single time that she fights, it is hellfire and brimstone. I mean, that girl wants to bring it, and she has bad intentions when she fights. At times, has been a little bit to her detriment, but someone who brings a fresh flavor and some violence to the 115-pound division for the ladies. And then opening up the card, you have Austin Bashi taking on John Yanis. John Yanis, a former Fury champion, signed on short notice. This is going to be a fight between obviously Giannis wanting to come in and make a name for himself and to make an impression here against a prospect who many consider to be a blue chipper in Austin Bashi. What do you folks think about this weekend's preview here for the UFC? Let us know online. You could hit me up at Jordan Kurtz. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. Everybody, welcome back to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. We're going to run through this weekend's CJJC 26 Sweet Summer Grappling card real quick here, then go 3 rounds to close off the program, and then we'll be back to you next week. But starting off in the main event, we have a matchup between Riley Alona of the Grapple House taking on our friend of the program, former host, UFC middleweight veteran, the Big Yins, Josh Fremd. Josh Fremd will be representing Nova Mente Jiu-Jitsu. This is, again, this is a main event matchup. You'll see a couple of rounds of no-gi action with an OT situation if permitted. In the co-main event, you have Alex Apodaca of High Altitude Martial Arts, who's going to be taking on Katie Labali Tabula of Raza BJJ. This is a matchup where I'm really excited to see because styles obviously are always a big factor in any sort of competition element. You have Katie, who is a jiu-jitsu purist, where on the flip side, you have Alex, who she's an MMA fighter, and a big part of her game and what makes her so good at MMA is she hits hard and fights like a psycho. Not having the violent element of the striking into the mix with jiu-jitsu, I'm interested to see how that factors in, but she works really well off of the wall, which is naturally a variable that comes into the mix here in the CJJC cage that isn't always present in every other grappling format. You have Giovanni Valles of New Era Jiu-Jitsu, who is going to be taking on Kyle Kirk. Kyle Kirk out of Says MMA. The Cesnalevich crew is always pretty well prepared. This is a gi matchup. Mike Cesnalevich, a longtime jiu-jitsu guy, first UFC heavyweight to pull off a heel hook way back in the day, a black belt himself in the Gracie system. That's a matchup that I'm interested in seeing how these guys be able to just continue to go out there and showcase themselves as they grow on this platform as grapplers. They're both veterans of the CJJC cage, making a return out there. And yeah, it's going to be 2 guys in that feature matchup who want to go out there and represent themselves well. You have a matchup between Matthew Wargo of Academy of Grind taking on Donald Rose now with the Subhounds. Both of these two deserve their flowers. They have taken on very stiff tests in their previous trips out to the CJJC cage. Collectively, their last 3 opponents between the two of them have been Josh Fremd, Basil Hafez, and Cody Brundage. 3 guys who are in the UFC, who are high-level athletes themselves. Basil being a very accomplished black belt in his own respect. I think that, again, each of these 2 guys being willing to step out there and take on that test of those tough athletes, those fighters who bring just a different level of grit and intensity than what most grappling purists might bring. They deserve their recognition. They deserve their flowers. They're going out there this weekend, and somebody's going to have to get their hand raised and somebody's not. I think that the styles of Donald might play a little bit favorably. He's very slick with his leg attacks. and he's crafty getting to the back. But on the same side of things, you have Matthew Argo, who he's a very strong opponent who is heavy in his hips and might make it difficult to get to those legs. That's why they go out there and make that walk. Opening up the main card, though, you have two athletes who are young, energetic, very hungry, and risk it for the biscuit anytime that they compete. And they might very well steal the match of the day right here, opening up the main card. And that's Bobby Taylor. That's Robert Taylor out of 10th Planet Parker, who's taken on Anthony Bendy out of DCO MMA. Anthony Bendy just won Grapple Games 2, the Attack Band series. Both of these guys are rubber boned and multi jointed. You'll see potentially some sequences in this matchup that will make you cringe. It'll make your stomach drop because you think, how are they not hurt? How is this not popping? How is this not just being utterly shredded and destroyed? Again, both of these guys are so flexible, so mobile, have so much pliability that the entanglements that they will get in will be something that I think that you will be entertained by. Running through a few more matchups here just to get through the card, we have Chris Davis taking on Jason Reyes. You have Garrett Munson taking on Trevor Thompson. That might be a scrap right there, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, Garrett Munson comes in there like a raging bull every single time. Trevor Thompson is a kid who trains with a lot of very high level people over there at high altitude martial arts. Two guys who I think that will go out there and be two angry dogs locking horns in the process. You have a matchup between Jeremiah Sperling taking on Jorge Venzer. Jeremiah Sperling was a finalist at Grapple Games 1 Card Jitsu. He was also on our GrappleCon card. You have Jorge Venzer on the flip side out of Factory X, who is making his debut on the CJJC side of things. Jorge's been putting in a lot of work. He has a wrestling background, and he's excited to go out there for his first competition in a pro card type of setting. On the flip side, he's going to have a tough opponent who presents some dimensional challenges for him. Jeremiah will be the much longer grappler. He will be the light pole to the fire hydrant of George's more short, stocky, and muscled up build, if you will. You have a matchup between Ray Maldonado out of Vibrant Jiu-Jitsu taking on the always active, always game Owen Body Bar. Owen Body Bar has competed on almost all of our last few shows. I mean, I can't think back to a card when we haven't had Owen in the process. So have to give him his flowers and his ever willingness to go out there and be a gamer, stepping into the fire, daring to be great. You have Easton Ellingson taking on Josh Oakes. Cameron Santos taking on Seth Tumbleson of Factory X and Evergreen Jiu-Jitsu. Seth Tumbleson was a finalist who went up against Anthony Bendy in the Grapple Games 2 Attack Bands series. Seth has a tremendous wrestling background, is a fascinating jiu-jitsu guy who has an attack skill set that catches a lot of people by surprise. By appearance, he's deceiving because Seth's still at just 19 years old. He's a late bloomer and he looks much younger than he actually is. And when you take a look at him and this sounds disrespectful, but it's not. And I've talked with Seth directly about it, but he still has very much boyish features. Like he could pass like he's a freshman in high school, but that kid wrestles like a grown ass man. So I'm excited to see how he fares against somebody in Cameron Santos, who, if we know anything about the Catalyst Jiu Jitsu squad and anybody who Trevor Paul puts out there, they're always going to be ready to compete. That Northern Colorado crew out of Catalyst, every single time that Professor Trevor, puts somebody in competition, whether it be kickboxing, MMA, Jiu Jitsu, whatever, they're prepared. So I think that this is a matchup that you get to see fireworks right away early on this card. You also have JT Taylor taking on Marco Moreno. And you have a couple of teenagers. You have Vinicio Rangel, who's taking on Victor Bustamante, 14-year-olds that are going to be starting the card, like we say. We are going to be starting the show at, I believe, Matchups are kicking off at noon. Doors are going to be cracking at 11. You could check out weigh-ins this weekend on the CJJC YouTube page. That's going to be also live in person at the Ugly Dog Sports Cafe. Check us out. Moving along from that to close out the show, we're going to go 3 rounds real quick to start us off here. Very first round, Lerone Murphy hopped into the mix to fight Aaron Pico after Movsar Evloev got hurt and won't be ready in a reasonable enough time frame for Pico to fight. Is this a good move? I think for Murphy, it's a risky move, but it's also a good move. And I say that it's a good move in the sense of where Lerone Murphy runs into trouble is that he doesn't really have that exciting win. Has he beaten some credible guys in the process? Yes. But the knock is he's a decisionator. He doesn't have a high profile fight or a big name that he was able to put on a highlight reel that is really kind of elevating him into that upper echelon discussion of the division. Aaron Pico could very well be that. Aaron Pico at one point in time was touted as the best prospect in all of MMA. He was the prototype, the blue chip. He was that dude that everybody wanted to have on their card. Made his bones through the Bellator ranks. Obviously, the situation with the PFL Bellator merger and all of that going along, he ends up into the UFC. Long overdue. Aaron Pico could also very well be that guy who kind of shatters the mold that we just spoke about earlier in the show with Buchecha, with Patricio Pitbull, of these guys who have came into the UFC as high-profile signees from other organizations who have stubbed their toe right away. Those were the couple from there. But then on the flip side, we've had examples like MVP who's came in and done well. We have RDR who's came in and done well, so on and so forth. I think that this is the type of high-profile matchup that helps propel Lerone Murphy. I know that it kind of sucks for our boy Yusuf Zalal because Yusuf was hoping to get that fight with Lerone, but Lerone Murphy, this is a good move for him to step up in a high-profile position and a marquee name against a recognized name collectively across the sport. High risk, potentially high reward. Second round. Of all the fighters for the UFC in Abu Dhabi whose last names ended in a V, only one lost. Said Nurmagomedov against Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell. Were you surprised? I'm not surprised that Bryce was able to pull off a victory. Bryce is a very talented fighter. Does he have some limitations within his skill set? And are some of those explainable by, for lack of a better term, or not to slight his modalities, but he trains in his shop on his land in Arkansas. There's only so much growth on the top end that he could have, being that he doesn't have just a lot of high level bodies, and he's achieved so much with what he has. And I also have good intel from people who are close to Bryce, and that he could excel that much more if he would choose to get himself out of that comfort zone and expand his horizons and do some different training and some different camps, or learn from some different folks. But one way or the other, that redneck Arkansas sumbitch is one of the toughest dudes on the roster, and he is not afraid to go in there and fight any man. He is not afraid to go up there against any force. As you saw in his post-fight speech, he sang the praises of Jesus Christ in a majority Muslim country, knowing that there could have been some stiff repercussions for him doing so. He is not afraid of a man in the cage. He is not afraid of a force outside of it. He believes that his faith is bigger than himself. And, this game, to be successful or to be someone who's around it in a long time, it does require a little bit of delusion. It does require you to be a little bit of crazy. And Bryce Mitchell is all of that. Do I think that we ever see Thug Nasty have 12 pounds of gold wrapped around his waist? No, but he is a very fun fighter who his storytelling is of the tops of the game, whether it is, if you go back and you listen to the drill bit story, him talking about hunting a deer, the story from the changing room this last week. Obviously, he's had a couple of stories that got him in some trouble and some hot water. But one thing that you cannot say about Bryce Mitchell is that he is not entertaining. Plain and simple. You can call him dumb. You can call him ignorant. You can call him all these different things that you want, team, God, squad, whatever. You can't say that he's not entertaining. You can't say that he's not tough. And you can't say that he can't fight, because he can. Third and final round. Amir Albazi reveals that the Nevada Athletic Commission pulled him from his fight this weekend. What are your thoughts? I can't disagree with it. I think that it's probably a good move that if in advance he wasn't cleared or he didn't pass medicals or physical pre-fight screenings, things of that sort, if it's this far out and he wasn't passing or they said that he wouldn't be cleared in time, probably a smart move. This is also an Amir Albazi who has had neck surgery, among a couple of other serious health concerns. He did not reveal the exact prognosis as to why or the specific injury, but we do know that he's had health issues. I would much rather see this be something that gets caught earlier and in advance prior to fight night so that we don't have a repeat situation that we had in the Blanchfield fight a few weeks ago. No need to beat a dead horse on that one, but if there are issues that are known or if there are things that are coming up that are of the serious element, which it does sound to be the case here, especially considering his medical history, I would much rather see this be the case. And even if Albazi felt like he could fight, I would rather that the commission errs on the side of safety, get this medical situation figured out, and then figure out what the next step is to get back to the cage. The last thing that we want to see is anybody to have a catastrophic health event inside of the octagon. That does no good for anybody. I know that the short-sighted vision or the selfish side is that even in some of these guys, especially in a main event slot, Albazi had a lot of money on the line. Not to say that you concede a loss, but in some guys' positions, they're in a financial dire strait to where they'll say, okay, I'll go out there and I'll do as much as I can, but if I take the loss, I take the loss. I still get that paycheck for showing up. And if this is a main event type of fight, well, I still get my main event bonus. I still get my compliance pay, so on and so forth, still get sponsor payouts, all of that. But that's, again, a short-sighted situation for the MMA community collectively, because a catastrophic event in the cage does not serve anybody in the best fashion. Just like that, though, folks, we are all out of time. We want to thank you all so much for joining us each and every week for Original Combat Sports Programming. Join us this weekend at the Stampede for CJJC 26 Sweet Summer Grappling. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Follow me along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by